day, another episode on the Untold. Today we have some beautiful, beautiful stories.
Yes.
I'm joined by Ahmad ALMazeedi as usual.
Yes.
Hussein Ajouz.
Hussein, Ajouz.
How do you feel?
I feel great. It's been an interesting week this week.
Yeah.
We have colorful guests this session.
That's true. That's
and
true.
today's guest is a friend of mine.
Yeah.
We've met like maybe, I don't know, the last 2 years or something.
Oh, nice. Okay.
Yeah. And she's from the UK. She is very interesting and you
She's
just
into
need to
food
hear
as well,
from her.
yeah?
Yes, big
She's a chef?
foodie. She's a chef.
And she has a very good,
entrepreneur.
interesting untold story.
Yes, and she has an untold story.
A very, very interesting
Very,
untold
very
story that
interesting
I think
untold story.
it's worth waiting for. And a second segment. Should be second segment, right?
We'll see.
We should. Okay, we'll see.
Yeah.
All right, let's do it.
Let's do it. We're back on the Untold, being joined by a very interesting character today, not a stranger for KTV2, my very good friend Lucy Moore. Welcome to the show.
Hi guys, thank you so much for having me.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too.
We have a lot of stories.
I do.
Honestly, we spoke before we started this episode. I'm sure this is gonna be a beautiful episode. So shall we?
Yes.
Right.
So we want to start from the beginning,
Yeah.
right? You're obviously from the UK.
Yeah.
We want to start with what you've studied and what brought you to Kuwait.
Very easy. So I actually studied media arts as my bachelor's, so
Nice.
the making of film and television.
Nice.
I also have my medallions in acting from LAMDA, which is the London Academy of Musical and Dramatical Arts.
Nice.
So
Nice.
I reached the highest I could get there. So I've been in front of and behind the camera. And then what brought me to Kuwait is friends. I got invited to visit a friend of mine and her fiance here. And
This was a decade ago.
12 years ago, and I said yes.
And you've been here ever since.
No, I came to visit. I came for a week. I extended
Okay.
to 2 weeks. I extended to 1
Yeah,
month.
yeah.
And then my mum was like, you need to come home for your graduation ceremony. So I
Right.
went home.
Okay.
I then moved to Bahrain for 2 years.
Nice.
And I then got offered a position over here. And that's when I relocated. So that was 2013.
And we know that you don't work in the field that you studied in, right? So you don't, and you made a huge shift both in region and in the career itself.
Yep.
Right.
So I stayed in the field of marketing for quite
Yeah.
a long time. So I was the managing editor of a magazine.
Nice.
I then went into the marketing and business strategy side. So I was always in the realm of media entertainment.
Yes.
And more specifically, as time went on, I moved into marketing and business strategy in F&B, in food. And food has always been my biggest passion. So it was kind of like merging what I love with what I was doing with my career.
Yeah.
And over time, and it sounds so silly because it never occurred to me when I was younger, but over a period of time, I was like, you know what, I think I'd really like to be a chef. And about a year ago, I started looking into, do I want to go back, and go to culinary school, or do I want to learn on the job?
Yeah.
And I'd already been working very closely with operations, obviously doing marketing, you have to
course.
tie the two together. So I thought, you know what, like I love Kuwait. I have an amazing community that I'm part of.
Yeah.
The thought of relocating and then coming back later, I was like, I don't think I want to do that. I think I want to stay and see how much I can learn being here.
Of course, yeah.
And so I kind of threw caution to the wind. I joined a place for a while in order to get some more training. And yeah, now my aspiration is to become a chef full time. So hopefully
Wow.
that's the
Oh,
road
I love
that
it.
I
That's
want.
I was actually going to say I love the thing you wrote on your Instagram. It's like following my dreams into the kitchen, and so it's just
And you need to try her food. She's very creative, has her own twist on dishes.
yeah.
Not to mention that sauce you make.
What
You know,
sauce? Is that special?
It is
Lucy
a very
sauce?
special Lucy sauce. It's called the crack sauce. And we can't talk about ingredients, I guess.
No.
It's a secret recipe.
That's the whole point, you know.
Yeah, that's the whole point. So, what made you just like fall in love with the Middle East?
I think it was, I had friends from the Khalij when I was at university back in England. And I've always, I think I've been raised to celebrate other cultures. My parents just put this curiosity in me from a young age. I was 6 months old the first time I went on a plane. So they took me all over the place. We went to Australia when I was 3. So I've always just loved learning about other cultures.
Amazing.
And I think the combination of meeting people from the Middle East and then getting invited to come visit, I was like, wow, there's like so much that is not portrayed in the media. And I think growing up in the West, like there was a period of time where there was a lot of negativity around the region. And I think I never bought it. I never believed it. There was always a part of me that was like, but is it really like that out there?
You have to see it for yourself, like confirm it. Is this actually the reality or just a weird perception that people have?
So like even when I moved to Bahrain, like people were asking my parents, "Are you worried about my daughter, your daughter?" And my parents were like, "No." Like she can look after herself. And my mum is a very firm believer that she feels that I'm safer living in Kuwait than I would be than if I lived in London.
Wow.
Because there's very low street crime. There's a very strong sense of community.
Absolutely.
Like I can safely say, if I ran out of gas and broke down on the highway here, I would say multiple people would stop to help.
To actually support you.
Whereas
100%.
back home, people would drive past going, "Oh, poor thing."
Poor thing.
And you would just be expected to call roadside assistance and wait for however long they took. So I feel like there is this very strong sense of community and hospitality.
It's a collectivist culture anyway. We live in families. It's like a very tribal kind of thing, and this is part of the culture, I think. You know, I love the fact he said at the start, Khaliji. You shouldn't say the Gulf. That's how you know she's been here for a while.
So invested in our
She's so
culture.
invested.
She knows so many, like, not just random normal words. She knows like our own, what do you call it? Not
the things I wouldn't know, to be honest. I mean, I was born and raised here. I was born and raised here.
Nuances, nuances.
But I'm very inquisitive. So when I meet someone, especially if they're passionate about their history and heritage and culture, I will ask questions. I'll be like, "Why do you do this? Where does that come from? Why this?"
So you're just a very curious person.
Very.
See, so obviously you've been traveling ever since you were 6. I said you went to Australia, was it? And so has this impacted what you do today in food? Like I'm sure food it has a lot of flavors usually. Has the traveling, this curiosity about the world, the Khalij world, inspired anything about what you cook?
Definitely. I'd say, so I was raised a vegetarian.
Oh, okay.
Something else a little controversial from my parents. It wasn't forced, but my mum was a vegetarian, or she is a vegetarian, and I was given the choice, and I naturally just did, followed what my mum was eating. So it wasn't until I was 18 that I even tried eating like meat, chicken, things like this.
And what was the first meat you ate?
Chicken liver.
Chicken liver. From being a
One thing I don't
vegetarian
know.
for 18 years, the first cut of meat she tried is chicken liver.
And honestly, it was only because I was working in a Michelin star restaurant at the time. The chef came to me and he'd been saying for a while, if you want to try something, just let me know. One day we're in the kitchen and he said, "Oh, would you like to try something?" And for some reason that day I said yes. And it just happened to be chicken liver. And I went home and I told my mum it was so good. And she was like, "Of all the things that you would try."
That's the one thing you started with.
One thing, chicken
And I told her, "But it's amazing." And she was like, "That's not how most people feel about chicken liver." So I then learned that, meat can be made very well or it can be made very badly. But I think being vegetarian, I always had to try different things. When, some of these superfoods that have become more popular in recent years were things that were just in my house from when I was young. Because my mum would be making alternatives. And at that age, or like growing up, there weren't as many vegan, vegetarian, ready things on the shelves. You had to make them.
Only recently that thing.
And my mum, bless her, is not a huge fan of cooking. So like, I was always very inquisitive to try new things, and my parents encouraged that. And as I grew up and was more independent from like what we were eating at home, like if we went out somewhere, I would try things. And for a long time, I'd try anything as long as it didn't have meat. And then when I did start eating meat and fish,
everything now.
I would then start trying everything. So the first steak I ever had was a kangaroo steak.
Kangaroo steak.
That exists, actually.
That does.
I never knew that.
And it's really good. It was when I went back to Australia when I was 18. And I was traveling around, and by that point, I'd tried quite a few things from my old chef, and went to this new country and was like, oh, they have new flavors. So every time I travel, and I think even if I really am very honest, from a very young age, my favorite place to go in any foreign country is the supermarket. I
I mean,
can
you're a
spend
chef to me. I'm not
hours.
surprised. You
Yeah.
like the food. You like to cook, and I'm
Right?
assuming you go and start imagining plates when you see the items.
Yeah, yeah,
That's what
and
happens
just
to
like
me when I'm hungry.
sheer curiosity,
Yeah,
like
yeah, yeah.
what can I discover? Because now
Yeah.
so much of, let's say, common ingredients are shared around the world. Like my mum and dad make Lebanon at home.
Really?
So yeah, so you know, like now, like things that are quite common in cuisine are like found everywhere. But there are
Yeah.
still those things that are like undiscovered, or you know, haven't yet found their way into other cultures and cuisines. So I think my curiosity really leads me down to what can I find that I've
Yeah, yeah.
never heard of.
So what's your actual favorite cuisine in that case?
I don't have a favorite.
I mean, you've tried a kangaroo steak, so I mean, I mean,
Do you have a favorite Kuwaiti dish?
I think mashed Bruce.
I was just gonna say,
yeah,
because isn't that
honestly.
one of the main?
Yeah, but
Lamb or chicken?
it really depends. If it's made well,
If it's
either.
made
Like if
well,
it's made
either.
well,
Okay.
both are equally as good. And I think that's really my philosophy is if something is made well,
Yeah.
even if it's something you don't like, you can still enjoy it. And I challenge myself when I go to good restaurants, I purposefully order things that I do not like the ingredients of, because if they're a good chef,
You just
I
make you like it.
Interesting.
yeah, I should be able to enjoy it.
Interesting.
So that's a little challenge I set for myself that, you know, the chefs don't know about, but
Yeah,
I do. And I'm like, the number of times that I've ordered something like celery, I do not like celery, but I've ordered it in very good restaurants and it's been one of the best
Make you fall
dishes
in
that
love with
day.
celery.
Yeah,
Thing
exactly.
is, obviously,
Yeah.
you're mentioning this theme in conversation where you talk about good, kind of like good eating and healthy eating, or not healthy, just ethical perhaps. I don't know what the word is really, because I can look at your business, the restaurant or the Lulu's Pantry, and I can see from what you wrote on your Instagram, it's like yummy treats and good for you eats. I mean, obviously, that's a very specific kind of slogan, and
Yeah.
I'm just curious as to what made you go that direction of kind of like good food.
I think it's honest ingredients. It's not using stabilizers or preservatives.
Yeah.
It's real food. And real food can be nutritious for you in so many ways.
Yeah.
And I really shifted my mentality when I was younger. And I think this comes from like the media. They were, you know, young women are very impressionable. So everything has to be low fat. Everything has to be diet. And everything has to be stripped of like anything. And everything just is boring and tasteless and bland. And actually not so nutritious for you.
Right.
You know, a big re-education for myself, like unlearning and relearning, was that fat is good for you, natural fat. And it doesn't mean you go and deep fry everything, but it means that, you know, the fat in butter or the fat in milk,
Nuts.
nuts,
We said natural fats.
avocado.
That's the thing that I think people don't know the fine line between what's a natural fat and like
Absolutely,
and a burger
yeah.
fat.
Yeah, and like even in burgers can be very good for you, but
Depends
where
on-
it gets unhealthy is if you're gonna sit and eat 5 in one go.
Right.
So it's also like relearning that moderation is good for you.
Moderation is always key.
Yeah, and when you start to have a little bit of everything and have a more mixed diet, and then the other side of healthy that I've been educating myself on is probiotics. So where can we introduce into our daily diets like fermentations, sourdough, kefir, and things like this that add good bacteria to our gut health and improve our digestion?
Such an important topic that I don't think people know much about, to be honest.
Yeah.
Yeah, even for me, I feel like I'm a beginner. I've just started
I mean,
to
If you're a beginner, I
understand.
don't know what I would call ourselves. you
Honestly,
know?
I think 100%. Like, I mean, you know, for me, it's not about just, okay, fair enough, I'm very careful with what I eat, but I think it's the guilt I get after eating like a very heavy burger and I eat 3 of them. Oh my God, it's like, I wouldn't be able to sleep at night, you know?
Yeah, yeah.
But yeah, fair.
It's a lot. I love this conversation and where it's headed, but I believe you have an untold story for us right after this break. We're back on the Untold, continuing our conversation. We left off with where I said you have an untold story. Lucy Moore here, when she was in Bahrain maybe a decade ago, you reverted to Islam.
Yes.
And we would love to hear your story about that.
Okay, so it actually goes back to when I was still in the UK. When I was at university, I actually went through a little bit of a hard time, and I was raised without religion.
Right.
I mentioned earlier my parents made some unique choices raising me, so I was never christened. And my parents raised me in a very non-religious household. I went to Church of England schools, but religion was never imposed upon me. I was never told you believe or you have to believe or you should believe. My parents told me it's completely your choice.
Yeah.
So I think for a long time I was just absent of having any belief or faith. And I went through this hard time at university, and I started getting this feeling of like, God is there, like God is protecting me and he's leading me. And then it was kind of like, what do I do with this? Like I have this found faith, and where do I go from here? Like, do I, just become Christian because I'm in a Christian country? So the curiosity got the better of me and I started researching.
Nice.
I started looking into Judaism, Christianity, like obviously growing up in a primarily Christian environment outside of the house, I knew quite a lot already. And around that time, I started meeting people from the Middle East. I had British Muslim friends, and I'd start asking them about Islam. And I kind of say, oh, like, why do you do this? Like, what's Ramadan about? Or, why do you pray 5 times a day? And, trying to just like understand from them, like, where does their faith come from? And the more I asked, the more questions I had. Like, it was never enough of an answer.
You're curious. You're always curious.
Yeah. And there was something, again, and I feel like you can't always articulate your faith because it's something that you feel inside. So I knew it was there, and I kind of just felt like, okay, like I really need to try and understand more about Islam. And I want to say it wasn't planned. It was more of a coincidence that I ended up moving to Bahrain. But I do think, like, I guess, like, subhanAllah, that was the path for me, because moving to the Middle East was like, oh, now I'm like surrounded by Muslims. And as much as I grew up in multicultural areas of the UK, I was never completely surrounded by the religion. So moving to Bahrain, again, I started asking a lot of questions. I met, I want to say, such a variety of people practicing their faith in different ways. I learned more about the history, the culture, and that just kind of, like, I know, it just felt so nice. Like, and actually the first time I ever heard the adhan was when I visited my friends in Kuwait, because I visited them before I went to Bahrain. And when I was woken up by Fajr prayer, and I didn't know what it was at that time, so I was just awoken by this noise. I was like, wow, that's so beautiful. Like, and I asked my friends when they woke up, what is that? And they're like, oh, that's the call to prayer. And I was like, wow, that was like...
You felt something.
It was amazing.
But that's also a perspective thing. Not everyone sees it that way. I don't think, at least. I think you just saw it.
I think she had the belief from within. She connected with
very
that.
much. Like I think
you felt spiritual.
Exactly, and I think I've always had that feeling, and that's why I find it hard. Like I stumble over my words, because it's like, how do you articulate something that is feels so right, but you can't necessarily explain why? And because I've been a why person, so how do I explain to other people if I don't know how to answer it for myself? So when I was in Bahrain, I started actually going to Islamic school, started studying to try and learn more about like the history.
Invested into it.
Yeah, and even like I would, I'd look things up online. I'd be on like YouTube, which can be a little bit of a rabbit hole. So I did at some point realize I probably shouldn't just click recommended, because, like that takes you
the algorithm is never...
So I kind of would listen to like YouTube shows that were from recommended by friends. You should listen to this person, you should read up on this, and I think it just felt right for a long time. So when I went into the school one day, one of the sisters said, if you thought about taking your shahada, and I was like, yeah, but I don't know what to do. And she was like, well, do you feel ready? And I was like, yeah, I think I've been ready for a long time. And she said, well, would you like to do your shahada here? So this was in, I think it was January, February of 2013, and it was just before I moved to Kuwait, like a few weeks, a couple of months before I moved. And so I took my shahada while I was there, but if I'm very honest with myself, I knew for a long time. Like that, I just knew from, maybe like even 2-3 years, I think even before coming to Melissa, I knew the answer before I even got there. And so taking my shahada was kind of like, okay, that seems like the next logical step. And as much as I still believe that I'm very early on in my journey, because I don't speak Arabic and I'm learning Arabic.
That's what I'm saying. The biggest challenge you would have is the language barrier. How to recite the verses and all that, but you've tackled that.
Yeah,
Or
I'm
like the
trying.
prayer at least.
Yeah, and I
Yeah.
think it's that I'm on that journey, and everyone's journey is unique. Everyone's journey is very personal,
Yes.
and I'm not a big fan of debating religion because I feel like I still need to learn more of it.
Absolutely.
And that's kind of taught me to be a little bit more humble in that I don't know a lot, so I try and learn from those around me. I try and learn from reading, but I really want to be able to read the Quran in Arabic because reading it as a translation, I'm like, okay, what am I not quite getting? What is not, what doesn't translate well into English? Because when I looked up, okay, what's the difference between English and Arabic? The Arabic language, I think has like 600,000 more words, or 6 times the number of words than the English
Arabic
language
is
has.
very vast.
It's very rich. So like if there's like 10 ways of saying it in Arabic, there's one way of saying it in English. So it's also that, okay, how much can I not understand by reading a translation? So I am trying to learn more Arabic. I study every day on an application right now.
Oh, you actually, okay, now, wow, nice.
Oh yeah.
But that must be, I mean, as Ahmed said, it's a long journey to learn Arabic. But it's such, I mean, for us, it's obviously first language, but it is challenging for the people that are just encountering
especially at an older age, learning any kind of language.
Yeah. And I am not a natural linguist. Like, I have never found it easy
But there's
learning
a driving
any other
force
yeah.
behind
There's a
it.
very strong drive, but
driving.
I think because you hear it all around you, and that's going to help you. Usually that's how people learn fast. When they watch things in Arabic, they hear people speak Arabic, and I mean, I think from your story, I just see how the power of kind of like asking why, where it can get you. Obviously, you're someone that was just asking why is this like that, why is this like that? And you didn't want to be spoon-fed things because of cultural reasons. You just want to discover by yourself, and I think that definitely is not everyone's like that.
Yeah.
And she's so invested in Arabic, and we're both pet lovers. And how do you tell your dog to sit?
G'day.
G'day.
G'day. Like literally uses
I'm hoping
Arabic
the dog is
words,
female.
teaching the
Yeah,
dog.
she is.
She is.
Yeah.
And it's Cleo. Hi, Cleo.
Please watch
I love that dog. She's just
Thank
very
you.
fun.
Yeah.
We just segued into pets. Sorry.
Whole other conversation.
Whole other conversation. So what is next? What is in your future? I hear that you're going to the embassy for the king's coronation. Tell me about that.
So I've been invited by the British Embassy, which obviously is my embassy, to be one of the partners who's going to serve food at the King's Coronation Street Party event, which is so exciting because I'm still so shy to put myself out there. I'm just moving into, I still consider myself a trainee chef. So when I was introduced to them and they said, we've been looking for British chefs in Kuwait. And I said, well, I'm on my way there. And they were like, well, we'd love to support you. And I think one of the most incredible things I've discovered in the last couple of months is just how much support I have out there for my community. And I've always been very integrated in the local community. AJ knows this, most of my friends are Kuwaiti and like expats from other countries.
Okay.
I've never been very much a part of the British community here because my parents told me if you live in another country, you're not living in another country to hang out with British people. So I took that to heart.
I agree with you.
Yeah, so now I'm seeing that, I have like my other community, which is my British community, and they're also coming out to support me.
Awesome.
And so participating in that is, for me, just incredible. It's
a huge
yeah, I was talking with friends earlier, and this is the first coronation that both my generation and my parents' generation will see.
Yeah, true.
Because for
the late Queen has been around for
decades.
Like I want to say almost a century.
Yeah, I think was it nearly 70 years, or I'm not very good with
it's a lot.
dates, but so this is a huge occasion. They've invited me to one of the celebrations on the day of the coronation, and then I'm actually going to be serving the king's official recipe, which is a quiche. A quiche is like a pastry and it's got cheese and other yummy things in there. So I'm going to be serving that along with some of my dips at the actual street party where they've invited more than 400 people or 300 or 400 people.
It's good for you. That's very good exposure, isn't it?
Yeah. Oh, it's incredible.
It's definitely a big step forward, perhaps?
Yeah, it's got that element of I'm like, oh, this is like real. Like now I'm not just telling my friends what I'm doing, and I'm not just telling my work associates, by the way, I've launched my own food concept. Now I'm telling strangers at a very official event, and I'm like, you know what? I feel excited.
I love that. You're proud of it.
Very proud, yeah, yeah. I feel like I get to be able to show the heritage that I come from, and this is actually the food that I'm going to be serving through all of my concepts, because there's going to be different elements to it. The food I serve is a celebration of my heritage, fused with an homage to the culture that has given me a home. So I'm doing Anglo-Arab food.
Anglo-Arab food.
See, that's very smart approach. It's just, I'm so curious, like Lucy that was back at uni, that was doing kind of media and so on, did she ever imagine herself to be talking about the story? About food?
Did you see this?
Did you ever envision
this life?
I think I've always known that I would live an exciting life.
Yeah.
And partly because I've never wanted to plan anything.
Was there ever a dream? As a younger...
yeah, I remember being very young and wanting to be a vet.
A vet?
And then discovering that you'd have to put down an animal if you couldn't, and I was like, no, I can't do that.
I'm so sorry. Exactly. I've never been able to do that.
Yeah, and then I did for a while wanted to be a lawyer, and honestly, I didn't believe that academically I could achieve it, so I didn't pursue it. And I still have a very keen interest in law. I'm a big believer that everyone should know their rights.
Absolutely.
I'd say I'm an advocate of that. I actually help other members of the expat community understand their labor law rights, because there's a lot of miscommunication, and often companies use it to their advantage that their staff don't know their rights. So I'm a big advocate of speaking up for people that maybe can't speak up for themselves. And then probably food. I just always loved food and acting. They were things that I just adored doing.
I love how you said you didn't plan for much, but I'm sure, as Ahmed said, you had a vision at least for the future. And I think a lot of people recently I've been talking to, they're saying the exact same trend. Like, I actually didn't plan much about my life. And that's the answer I started saying about my own life as well. But sometimes people have this debate or argument that you have to plan everything in your life, and you have to plan it step by step.
Take it day by day.
But here you are. I mean, I think exactly. You took it day by day, and
you never know where your life leads you.
I've always followed my heart.
That's good.
I've been very good at leaving situations that are not healthy to be in, and going with that gut instinct of like, you deserve better. And that pursuit of, I'd say, happiness, because I think a lot of people, they make decisions based on money. And years ago, I told myself, like, you cannot be tied to money. If you're always tied to this is how people can control you. And actually, if you release those shackles of materialism, you can live a lot more freely. And my target in life, and when people ask me, like, oh, are you building a company so you can sell it and make money? And I'm like, no, I actually want. Yeah, I want freedom. I want that if I want to take a few days off and fly to another country for a meeting, I can. And I can explore opportunities. And for me, the most valuable thing is my freedom. And being able to have that autonomy over myself.
Absolutely. We're reaching the end of our show, and usually we ask our guests to have like any advice. So I would ask you for any advice for aspiring chefs, aspiring entrepreneurs, and even foreigners from the UK maybe about Kuwait. Any last words you have?
Oh. Explore.
Explore.
Ask why.
Yeah, ask why, get out, explore, be open to opportunities. And I think just...
keep an open mind.
Yeah, follow your heart. Really follow your heart.
I think that's the takeaway from today's episode. Follow your heart. We'll be right back. Thank you so much.
Thank
you so much for coming on the show. We'll be back for the wrap-up right after this. What an episode tonight. Wow. Beautiful conversation. Beautiful untold story, like we spoiled in the beginning of our show.
Exactly. No, I think
and I just love hearing their take on it, you know?
I think Lucy has a lot to say, and definitely one episode doesn't do it justice, I'll be honest.
Yes.
And it's just from one topic to the other, you feel like there's way more to talk about, but it's just we have to kind of like cut it short and tell the audience obviously everything about this woman. But honestly, good luck to her with everything.
Good luck to you with everything you're doing and the businesses you're gonna open up.
100%.
And I cannot wait to try more of your food.
Hopefully
the dip. And I'll invite you too.
Yes, all right. Thank you so much.
Join us next time for another exciting episode of The Untold. Ahmad Mazeedi.
Ajouz.
Good night.
Good night.